when you were all black and I was only looking at myself for about an hour in that last.
Okay, all right.
We can see you perfectly, Paula.
I know. I didn't want to look at myself though, Ewan.
I think she's going to come down. All right, Maureen, everybody, I'll call the meeting to order and declare the March finance meeting formally open. I just remind those members and staff in the chamber that the COVID protocols for those in the chamber require us to wear masks when we're not seated, but otherwise when seated we can remove our masks. Before I go into apologies, I'd give notice that Maxine, my very competent Deputy Chair, will chair the meeting from item 7, and I'm absolutely certain that elected members will extend the same courtesy to Chair Maxine as you do to me as when I'm acting in the role as Chair. So. Okay, so let's move through the agenda. Item 1, apologies, and we have here apologies from Councillor Hamilton and also for myself and Councillor O'Leary for early departure. Are there any further apologies?
No, but can I extend good wishes of this meeting to Councillor Hamilton's partner who's having surgery today. Kia ora.
Thank you, Maxine. Thank you for that, and we certainly will. Confirmation of the agenda. I'll move. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mark Bunting. If there's no discussion on that, those in favour, well, we'll do this today by raising of hands. Those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Apologies, please.
Sorry?
Could we go back and vote on the apologies?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yep. Thank you, Governance. Yes, we'll go back and vote on apologies. I'll move that apologies be received. Councillor Dave is seconding. Those in favour? Against? Carried.
Any prediction for finishing time, Mr Chair? We normally do that at the stage of the meeting.
I will leave that to my learned Deputy Chair, who will be managing the meeting by then. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Public forum. We have no speakers in the public forum today. Item 5 is the confirmation of the Finance Committee open minutes of the 10th of February, which I will move as a true and correct record. I have a seconder. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Have we had feedback on the staff action items? On Te Awa cycleways? That was item 6 on the capital monitoring report. Ian, will you have you got a response back for that?
Apologies, Councillor Robb, I wasn't listening, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Item 6 in the minutes during your capital portfolio monitoring report, staff undertook to provide an update to members on the progress of Te Awa cycleways project.
I do not have that update, Councillor Robb, but I'll see if I can get that information this morning for you.
Okay, that'd be great. Perhaps you could, if you do, you could include that in your report back to us. And then item 7. Oh yes, I'm sure that we've done that. Yep. Tracy, I'm sure we've already done.
I think I've done a little bit of that.
Several times, probably. All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion to approve the minutes. Can we do that, please, by a show of hands? Those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Right, the Chair's report. I just I just want to preface this report. It was prepared to meet the time guidelines of the organisation, so it had to be in at least 2 weeks ago. I would have expected by now that we would have had a draft annual plan in place, and that staff would be busy preparing a report for community consultation, but we're all aware that following 4 3/4 days of consideration, the annual plan deliberations remain incomplete, and a further meeting on Thursday is expected to finalise those deliberations. My part of the Chair's report comments on aspects of the annual plan and the financial outcomes, alternatives, pros and cons of decisions, and what you might expect from a Chair of Finance. I would prefer today that today's discussions not relitigate the lengthy discussions that we've already had, nor make predictions for what we might want to discuss on Thursday. But I'm happy to take questions on the report. I've tried to make the report factual and not my view on where we should necessarily go. And the second part of the report is an update from Deputy Chair Maxine on work around procurement. So if you've got questions on that, we'll direct those through to Maxine. Okay, so I see Councillor Dave, you have...
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob. My first question is to you is, are you aware that the draft annual plan to date has already taken longer than any other annual plan or long-term plan in my 24 years of history on council?
I wasn't aware of that, but I think most of us know that it's taken an awful long time to get where we have got so far. Yeah.
And perhaps, Mr. Chair, were you also aware that there is perhaps a confusion on the part of the elected members between what happens in a 3-year strategically oriented plan and a 1-year adjustments to that plan? Okay.
I think I'm certainly aware of it, as indeed I believe many others are.
Thank you. I had another question on a different matter. You did mention it was quite a handy little paragraph there where their revenue streams are coming from. Waka Kotahi 16%, so it's quite a significant part. It's 30 odd million, I guess, a year on average. We inflation adjust and try and look for future costs. I'm aware that certainly in some cases, Kotahi, when they allocate funds to a project, look at current costs, and then there are escalations for inflation and all sorts of others. I'm not aware whether we get an automatic adjustment in the amount that they've allocated to our projects in future years. So I'm just wondering through you if any staff, such as former NZTA manager sitting up the back there, might know the answer to that.
I just would add that the table that I put to my chair's report is an extract from the LTP, so I haven't done a deeper dive than that. But Chris, I think
it's twice what I said. Sorry,
it's 66 million. Yeah.
I think my view on that would be for maintenance and renewals. We get a bulk fund on a 3-yearly basis, and it's not indexed to inflation.
So effectively, it's current value on year one sort of thing.
It'd be current value. When we go to projects, we get approval for funding, and then we work with them to deliver the project, and generally they share. They contribute a share of the cost of the work. So if there is inflation costs or cost increases, generally they're very good at paying their percentage subsidy at a project level.
So the proportion that's renewals and maintenance of the total, but their total allocation to us, what would that be roughly, ballpark?
I'm not sure, but it's very high.
So the majority.
It's probably the majority, even maybe we're in an unusual time with just peacocks at the moment and the sheer volume of peacocks, but generally it's would be the majority.
Which isn't inflation approved. So is that something that anyone has addressed before with them?
Yeah. Can I pick up that issue just to double check that my advice is right and if there are options there? So I think we do, generally they approve on a 3-yearly cycle, and I think there was a discussion the other day about opportunities that might open up in year 3 for extra work. So I just want to double check that that's not an opportunity. That was more for
capital projects though, wasn't it, or new projects?
I think it was, my recollection, it was about low cost, low risk, yeah, so capital, but at those program levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to labour the point anymore, but I just think there's an opportunity, well, there's a lost opportunity at the moment, perhaps in that area of significant revenue, Mr Chair.
Mr Chair, I'll pick that up as an action and maybe by email.
And it certainly may become an issue if inflation that's predicted upwards of 8% in terms of the inflationary figure that was put into the LTP. It could be significantly less than the actual inflation rate.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll try and have that information ready for Thursday.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Dave. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Rob. Following on from Councillor McPherson, Chair Rob, in your experience both as financial chair and as a chartered accountant, is it your advice that financial discussions and decision making, is that best rushed or more appropriately given considerable thought and time and processing?
Both, I guess, because sometimes you have to make decisions reasonably quickly, but I think that you are right. Significant financial decisions should be made with full information being available and an opportunity to ponder those and ask questions, and then use those responses to reformat or reformulate perhaps the financial direction that an organisation might be going.
Thank you. In your years of experience, can you help explain to me why we have an annual plan process?
Oh, goodness me. I guess many businesses, in my experience, do annual budgets. But I believe that our annual plan and our long-term plan are largely formulated by statute. And so it's as new to me, in being a city councillor and chair of finance, it's new to me that we have the structure of a 10-year long-term plan, a 30-year infrastructure plan, and then an annual plan.
Would most businesses do an annual plan to double check and verify current market trends, inflationary pressures and cost escalations?
Yes, they would. I mean, in my experience, depending on the size of the organisation, most private sector businesses typically have at least a 3 to 5 year business plan, which would include a budget, and that they would relook at those budgets each year in light of market forces and in light of how the business was performing, in order to look at whether or not some form of amendment might be required at the beginning of each year, each financial year.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Ewan. Mayor Paula.
Thank you, Rob. I was just going to talk about the statute around the annual plan, and I have a view on that, but I can raise that later. It's been answered largely by you. I mean, it is true that we have no, these things are all prescribed in law, isn't it? And the annual plan isn't an overall just adjustment of the long-term plan. It's progress report, if you like, with some changes as required. And it's a financial progress report, isn't it?
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Rob. Just following on from my learned colleague and far more experienced than my colleagues, does it concern you that this annual plan may actually take longer than the year we're planning for? No, okay. No, but
Certainly at the moment, I might suggest that, but I might have a different view on Thursday. I might have a different view on Thursday night.
does it worry you that the way this meeting has started, that this may carry on into the annual plan?
No, most certainly not.
But my other question is to Deputy Chair Max about the procurement review, which is really interesting because obviously this will be flexing and changing as conditions flex and change, as I see with a desire for local business, etc., which I applaud, which I would imagine would come under more stress with, with tougher economic conditions. Will we be having a briefing or a workshop before the May Council meeting so we've got our heads right around it?
Thank you, Councillor Mark, for your question. Yes, the report that I've added to the Chair's report today was really just a very high-level update on the work that we did in November to explore some of the issues. I've outlined those in there. There is now the opportunity to caucus with some staff and ELT, and Igor will be, who's our procurement manager, will be convening that next month. There's a report that needs to be prepared mid-April, and hopefully after that date we'll have the opportunity, and I seek governance's leave to find us at least 30 minutes around 30 minutes in a briefing between mid-April and the May council meeting for us to have a look at that, thrash it out.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Have a bit of a preview.
Thank you, Rob.
So,
Thanks.
kia ora.
Thanks, Maxine. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Dave.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. When you answered Councillor Wilson, you talked about the need for consultation and spending time, I think, over significant, use that word, items. I'm just wondering whether you would regard an item that represented 0.01% of the budget, i.e. around 40,000 or less, whether that was regarded as significant.
No, certainly not material, but may well be when it's all in aggregate. It may well be.
Very diplomatic answer, thank you.
All right, so we've completed questions. I will move that the Finance Committee receive my report. I have a seconder from Councillor Maxine. Is there any debate? There being no debate, I will ask for acceptance of that motion by way of show of hands. Those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Mr Chair, just a technical point. I understand when someone's talking on Zoom, we only see their screen, but at the moment we're only seeing, for instance, Paula's screen right now. It was Ewan's before when they weren't talking. Is there a way you can see who's all there?
We can change the view.
Look,
we're just working through.
it wasn't a big point, but I thought it's great to see the mayor, but if we have to see only the mayor the whole time, it might be a bit much.
Sorry, Councillor Martin, I see your hand is up, and did that come up before the vote on? No.
Yeah, I didn't realise you guys could only see me. That's terrible.
The lovely montage of the council chambers I'm seeing with 3 dots and a chair. There's only 3 of you in the chamber.
I'm hoping to go down shortly. I've just got a few things to do.
Just a lovely, probably you're better by sound than sight, actually.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Okay, we'll just take a couple of minutes now so that we can change the chair. and Maxine will be chairing the remainder of today's meeting. So you can see I'm exhausted after. Just put my mask on. Following the protocols.
Yeah. I've got a footrest and I've put the seat down. So, thank you everyone, and thank you Chair Rob for your introduction and for taking the beginning of that meeting. I seek the indulgence of the meeting and your patience and your care of me. As my first moment in the chair, I feel the weight of responsibility, but also the power. So I'm going to move us on now to item number 8, and I beg your pardon, item number 7, and invite Ian, that's you presenting your report to us. And Ian, if you could highlight the parts of the report that you would like to discuss, and we'll leave it in your hands.
Good morning, Councillor Maxine, Chair Maxine, I should say. Councillors, Your Worship. Capital Monitoring Report for the 7 months ended 31st of January 2022. I will talk briefly to some of the highlights within the report, but I'll take the report largely as read. The report covers 4 broad topics: the actual result for the 7-month result, changes to the overall capital budgets being put in front of the Finance Committee, an update on our work in progress position, and then concluding with some individual project and portfolio risks. The actual result for the 7 months was 137.1 million, with associated revenue for the same period of 50 million. On average, that's telling us that the organisation's spending about 20 million a month on the capital program, and I can tell you, looking at the February result last week, we spent 19.8, so that's consistent in terms of what we've been seeing over the last 7 months. That's what we continue to spend on average. I will note, because there might be some issues around the ability to deliver the capital program this year in terms of the financial performance. Last year at the same period in time we had delivered a program worth 100 million, and last year the overall program we delivered was 245. So you can see even this year to last year we're already well ahead of the game, and again it just talks to the fact about the uplift in the delivery of the program. The annual budget. Look, just as a quick recap, it does change, we know that. We start the year with our LTP budget at 328, and then through reporting through this committee, we bring changes through here to get those approved. Those changes largely fall into 2 categories, deferrals and brought forwards. I want to stress with those that those deferrals and brought forwards are only timing changes. This is what I refer to as budgets that are moving across the spectrum. So we're either moving them out into a future period, or we're bringing a approved budget forward from a future period into the current period. The deferrals never change the nature of the scope of the project. The project is ultimately delivered. It's just not delivered maybe in the time frame that had been published in the LTP. The other category is approved changes, which we bring to this committee for approval, and I'll cover those in a little bit more detail coming up in terms of the 31st of January position. I wanted to just make you aware in terms of trying to understand all these budget movements, because there are quite a few. There's 3 attachments in the report this time. There's normally only 2. Attachment 2 is a 1-page summary which shows you all the movements by capital expenditure and capital revenue. It breaks it down into those categories, being deferrals and brought forwards and changes. And it shows you the changes that were approved at each committee meeting previously. So you've got a good indication and a good record of how we moved from point A to point B throughout the year. Then an attachment for those who love numbers, for the people out there who wanted to be accountants but never could. And attachments 3 and 4, I've attached reasonably comprehensive the capital program at a project level that mirrors what's published in our LTP and annual plan. And again, so you've got and you can see again with those the individual movements under those categories. So you've got quite a good indication of again how the changes are made and what projects they impact on. I'm not going to talk in that detail today, but that information's there for your information, and you can type back and you can always come back to with any specific questions on those. The feature this month is up until now I've only been giving you a capital expenditure tracking sheet. I've now introduced a capital revenue one as well, because as we probably know, the capital revenue is just as important to track, and it just closes a loop in terms of the information that you have in front of you. In terms of the capital budget for the current financial year, the previous Finance Committee meeting we were reporting a position of 351. We're now reporting that we're revising that downward to 308.4. That's, again, you can see that in paragraph 32 and on the attachment and attachment 2. The two main drivers for that downward shift is we've identified a further 50.1 in deferrals for this current year, and that's taking our annual disclosed deferrals to 90.5 million. And the other changes basically fall into two general categories. We have increased our connections budgets. Just as a side, the connections budgets are in the water, wastewater and stormwater area where we undertake connection work on behalf of the development community. The user pays. It's very much driven by the demand of the market. Our budgets tend to be a dollar in, dollar out. They've proven to be a little bit inadequate, so I've increased those to reflect the actual turnover of that business, primarily because it has a good uplift on the revenue side of the ledger. So it talks more to what Tracy will present on the P&L, because there has been quite a significant increase. And to give you a feel for that, that's $3.7 million we've increased the cost, but equally there's a $3.7 million uplift in revenue as well. Okay, and the other changes, apologies, they're a little bit late, but they were changes approved by the Finance Committee on the 14th of December when you received the COVID report and the cost escalation report from Chris Barton. Those changes were approved and they're now reflected in the budget, in that budget as well. So that covers the change in the capital budget, and now, as I said, reporting at 308.4 annually. I mentioned a little bit earlier about deferrals now sitting at 90.5 disclosed. That's the actual disclosed deferrals. We have revised our year-end estimate to 110 million. So we do expect, as we do move through the next few months and get to the end of the year, that those deferrals will increase. And as that certainty is, we know that certainty, we will come back to committee and disclose those to you. And it's that 110 that was used in the annual plan modelling and discussion that you've had over the past week or so. Okay. In terms of work in progress, it's remaining reasonably constant. Still, we're reporting a figure of 480.6 million, which really is quite constant with what we've reported over the last 3 or 4 meetings. The focus continues to be on the outstanding, because as I've said, I think about every time I sit here, it's the outstanding that's the issue for us. That's the one. That's the work in progress that must be capitalised. So the strong focus is on that, and I'm pleased to say that we are about to recruit for a new capitalisation manager who's going to be able to get into some of the detail, because as you appreciate, some of these projects are reasonably complex in terms of both the financial analysis and tying them back into asset management systems. So that was an approved position we had in the establishment schedule, and as I say, we're about to start recruitment on that now. Finally, we've got project and portfolio risks. In terms of individual projects, we're reporting 14 this time. It's quite an increase on the previous report where I think we were 5 last time round. Look, if you were to read the little summaries against each of the projects, you'll see they generally fall into one of 2 categories. It's either a timing risk or it's a cost risk. and sometimes it's both. You'll find in this case we've got quite a lot of the new ones coming and a timing, and that talks to the level of deferrals that I've just talked about. And the other one is, of course, the cost risk, and I'll talk about this a little bit further. And I know the annual plan has had a lot of discussion on this, but the cost escalation concerns out there as we're going to market, and we're starting to see prices come back in terms of what we think might be happening. And I want to stress that these are not known cost increases. These are the risk that we believe there are cost increases. It could be hit in the budgets, and we want to alert you to them, make you aware that staff are monitoring those. In terms of then the two portfolio risks, my last section is, look, cost escalation. We've been reporting this effectively since August last year. We've been aware of what's been happening out there in the marketplace. I believe through the annual plan process, Council have currently resolved on a general 5% increase across the budgets going forward. So that'll be resolved on Thursday. What I did want to stress, and it's come up a number of times, and I have stated in paragraph 67 of the report, is to date, we've only actually come back to Chamber twice this year with two specific requests for budget increases associated with cost increases. The first one of those was through Council, and it was just a $600,000 increase on the Rototuna Library that was specifically identified as being as a result of cost increases in the contract as it was when it came to be awarded. And the other one was back on the 14th of December where Chris Barton presented the COVID and cost escalation report, and there was a specific reference in there to the Wairui Drive interchange where in addition to the additional COVID costs, there was also $1.7 million in cost increases associated with that. Those, to my knowledge, are the only two that's come back through this chamber directly as a result of Council having to pay more for those things. It doesn't take away the risk, and that's why those risks are sitting back in those previous section of the individual projects where we say there's a risk, but they haven't crystallised yet. We want to make you aware of them. And the final portfolio risk, is COVID in general. Really, look, what we're making you aware of is that we're nearly out the other end of COVID, I believe. We don't believe there's any further contractual risks around claims against us, although there possibly could be. The risk is more around what we're currently seeing at the moment with maybe delays and being able to deliver the program due to staff shortages as so many people are at home self-isolating, and that potentially could have a cost implication. More likely maybe having a delay in delivery, which that will then impact on your deferrals as well. So again, something we're monitoring and something that we're very conscious and aware of. So on that note, I'll take the rest of the report as read, and I'm happy to take any specific questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Very fulsome and well-explained report, as usual. First question from Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Maxine. Ian, thank you for your detailed and lengthy explanation. I've got a number of questions. Can I first just challenge you a little bit on your narrative regarding deferrals? You said, look, deferrals simply move things along, they still get done, and I interpreted that to be that has no change of actual costs. Are you sure about that? Is there not a logical inflationary element and cost escalation element that could occur on any project that is deferred outside of the projected year that project was to occur?
That is, look, you're 100% right, Councillor Ewan. While the deferrals don't change scope or the actual project, they do change the timing. If the timing, we're in a current environment where we are seeing some reasonably high cost escalation. If that project budget was to move out a period of time greater than 12 months, 24 months, then yes, there would be some concern over was the budget still adequate to deliver that, and if that was the case, staff would report back to this committee at that time to advise them of the impact. Current policy is with deferrals is they get deferred based on the dollar they are in. because generally up until now we've had reasonably a stable economic environment and we were not seeing substantial cost increases across our budget. So that's what we were doing, but you are right that if budgets moved, inflation moved at a fair rate of knots, then yes, potentially some of the budgets may be inadequate.
So Ian, in light of the fact that we've had COVID 1 and 2, we've now got a war in Europe, and even the most conservative economists are saying that we can expect this for a period of time. Are you suggesting that we review that policy?
I don't know if I want to use the word review the policy, Councillor Wilson. The other point I'd make is largely with the deferrals, the works are substantially underway. They have started. They were meant to have started this year. So we're not talking about a cold start. So probably what you're finding is a timing change. The bulk of the work will get done in the following financial year. So contracts are probably being drawn up, designs are being done. So it's not like we're saying they're being delayed by a large period of time. So we could certainly have a look at that. I'm sure Tracy would be better served talking to this issue in terms of the resilience we bring into our financial strategy.
Okay, Ian, on the basis of a couple of conversations I've just had with Tracy as close as yesterday, as recent as yesterday, I'm very confused by your comment that cost escalation in this current trading year has only been 600,000 with the library and 1.7 million versus in regards to COVID. Tracy said to me that, in fact, in terms of CapEx, that's considerably higher, and she points to Peacocks and the current contract that we have with Peacocks. So while you're thinking about that, I guess at the court, would you like to give me your thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry if that was misleading. The point I made with that is there's only been 2 contracts through this committee this year in respect to cost escalation, which were the 2 I mentioned. Through the annual plan, you are dealing with specifically with the Peacock cost escalation contract, which will happen in a future period. And I thought that had been very well reported and documented through the annual plan process.
Okay, so in your, on page 15, you simply say, in simple terms, that we had budgeted for capital expenditure to be 328,700,000.
Correct.
And then in 5 you say that in fact expenditure had increased to 351.3 million. And now that's a $22.6 million more spend than we had budgeted for. Explain to me why that is. Putting aside the 90 odd million in deferrals, we said we were spending 328.7. We've spent 351 according to your report.
So,
but you're saying we've had no cost, other than the 600,000 for the library, 1.7 million for COVID, we've had no other price contract escalation or cost escalation.
So if I could get your attention to attachment 2 within the report, which I talked a little bit earlier about, you will see it's a landscape table of budget changes for both the expenditure and the revenue for the capital program. And if I start in the top left-hand corner, so to speak, you'll see the approved budget, opening budget 328.6, which was your published LTP number. And then you will see across the horizon, as at 1st of July, as at 30th of 1st of August, 31st of October, and so forth. Those align with previous Finance Committee reports. And you'll see that then if you come down on the rows, you'll see the classification of said changes. So the first major change you'll see on the 1st of July is we started with 328 published LTP, and then we brought in, we already had pre-approved deferrals from the previous financial year of 51.4 million. And we also had, further, a couple of rows down, you'll see we also had increases to the budget to reflect the water stimulus program which the central government is funding. If you continue across the horizon, you'll finally get to, as at 30th of November, and if you take your ride down to the closing expenditure budget, you'll see the 351.3 million that I referenced in that section of the report you quoted, Councillor Wilson, which is largely made up of the deferrals of 40.4 million plus other changes of 4.9. So and you'll see immediately to the left of that the 600,000, which was 31st of October, and that speaks directly to that library contract I mentioned earlier as well. And so then if you move again across to the right, you'll see we're now sitting at the 31st of January, which is today's meeting, and we've got a final closing position of 308.4 million. So the whole purpose of that table is to let you understand how the budget moves from point A at the start of the LTP through to today. And then in addition to that, for those who do like to look at the detail, there are in attachments 3 and 4 far more granularity around how those numbers have been made up.
So, Ian, are you saying that 51 million in deferrals has actually been spent and those contracts are complete?
I'm not saying that. This is a budget report, Councillor Wilson. I'm saying that that's one of the reasons that the budget moves away from your LTP position. I don't have the data in front of me to tell you the exact status of the spend on those, but I could certainly go and find that for you if you wished.
Well, look, I'm simply as a layperson looking at the finances, and I'm simply being told that expenditure had increased to the figures that you've got in the report, 351. And so I'm just saying that you're saying that that's what we've done, and I'm saying, great, so we've done that and we've completed. I'm asking you, we've spent that, we've done that project, have we?
Look, without going into the detail, Councillor Wilson, that 51.5 million is made up of a substantial number of individual projects. I don't have that detail in front of me. So then you would type back and say, you'd probably that's a question you would ask yourself is, how much have we spent year to date at the 31st of January? And we've spent 137 million across the entire portfolio. And so you'd be tracking that against your year-end projection.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Is that the finish to your questions, or would you like to be able to take some time at a later stage to catch up with Ian to get through some of the more nuanced detail?
I'm trying to absorb Ian's answers, and I'm probably even more confused than I was before he tried to answer the questions. I'm particularly confused about this suggestion that in the last 9 months of this trading year that we've had only those 2 inflationary/COVID escalations, and that is just not running true with everything else I've been told.
I think what Ian's trying to express there is that those are the only 2 that needed to come back to this committee for approval in increase in the value, and others which have indeed been affected have had scope within them. And perhaps if I can ask Chris to add some detail to that answer. Thank you.
Right, am I on? Can you hear me?
Not quite. There we are.
Oh, that's better. If I could explain it this way, there's 2 things going on here. One is cost escalations, and the other thing is adequacy of our budgets to cover multiple things, including cost escalations. So cost escalation is real. It's happening on every single thing that we do. But the question really that we're looking at is, are our budgets for the projects adequate to cover those escalation? A lot of our budgets are. So what we're saying in this year, there's only 2 projects where our budgets haven't been adequate to cover that escalation. So one of those is the Waiari Drive project, which is in progress, and we have contractual ways of measuring the escalation and a need to pay under the contract, similar to the Peacocks one that you've been debating as well. The library one was once again, forward-looking, we've entered into a contract to build that. We've looked at our budgets, and our judgment has been that budget's not adequate to cover the escalation, so we've asked for more money. Now, elected members will have a report in PX today, which is awarding another large contract, and escalation is real. It's part of that contract, but the budget in that case is adequate to cover it, and we're not asking for any extra money. So that's the reason why there's only two, Councillor Wilson. It's the difference between escalation and the budgets that we've got to cover multiple variables, of which cost escalation is just one.
So thanks, Chris. So so just on a couple of points, what's the Waiwere Drive escalation cost?
So we came to councillor some time ago, and we had some detail in there, and it was $1.7 million. I think, is it Ian? Can you just check that?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's in this. Yeah, $1.7 million is what council approved for addition to the budget to cover cost escalations that were linked to index movements.
Okay, and peacocks?
Peacocks is something you're currently debating as part of the annual plan, and you haven't concluded all of your discussions there, but you'll do that this Thursday. But once again...
And I wonder whether we might be able to leave those conversations for the meetings in which they're most relevant. And it's
with all due respect, Madam Chair, with all due respect, Madam Chair, this is a Finance Committee, and so I have a question on that. Thank you. My last question, in regards to...
Ewan, I beg your pardon, though. Actually, I think I'm quite clear about the right place to have these discussions. Yes, this is the Finance Committee, but that discussion on the peacock escalation is held within the annual plan meeting. That meeting hasn't been concluded, and so I'll be ruling that any further discussion on that be held over till Thursday, where there is the opportunity to discuss it.
All right, thank you. Madam Chair, my last question. Madam Chair, my last question is regarding budgeting processes. Chris, you've said to me a couple of times that cost escalation is real, it's happening, we're confronting it, but that it still falls in the broader budget parameters. Explain to me how you put your budget, just remind me of the logic with the budget creation. Is it based on actual quotation, in which case you add a contingency? I'm just confused at how we can have this significant cost escalation, but it's not requiring us or requiring you to come back to us for more budget. Is it because we over budget, or just help me understand that?
Yep, so probably a couple of points. When we put together our budgets as part of the long-term plan, we have a crystal ball out, and we're trying to look into the future in terms of that project and what it might look like with very little information. But we do that with a lot of good background work, and we consider the scope of the project, some of the risk of the project, and what contingency we need to cover risk. But we do not, in that process, consider cost escalation. So all of our budgeting for a long-term plan will be expressed in, for the last 10-year plan, $2019. And then when we go into the programming process, there are assumptions made on cost escalation through advice from Burl, in this case for the annual plan 3%, and that gets added to our projects on a formulaic basis, and the dollars get escalated up. So the escalation is treated quite simply from our cost to do the job and the contingency that we have in there. So the contingency we have is not specifically for cost escalation. But the way projects go, sometimes, you know, our job is to give you our best estimate for the project, and you may have heard this language before, that we, like the industry, work on a P50 basis, so a 50 percentile accuracy basis. So estimates 50% of the time will be right and 50% of the time they won't be right. So there's so many variables as you deliver a project, and scope is probably the biggest one in terms of how you consume your contingency and whether you need enough money. So in these two particular projects, our contingency has been sufficient to absorb the cost escalation. So rather than just go ahead and ask for the cost escalation because it's real, we've said to you, we think we can fit this in with contingency, so we don't come and ask for money. If we don't think we can fit it in, we come and ask for money, like the two projects.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Councillor Ewan. Now, next in the question lineup, Dave McPherson.
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Dave.
Chair. Firstly, good answer on the deferrals earlier, Ian. Secondly, I'm going to not ask the question on the cost escalation of Wairere Drive, following your advice that that's for later. But I just do have one which I'm hope you will rule as relevant in relation to the comment, the point you made, Ian, about the connections budget for connecting services going up by 3.7 on both sides of the ledger. Am I hearing right, or reading it right, I should say, that that means we've got a significant increase in the number of residential and commercial dwellings coming on stream, dwellings and enterprises?
Sorry, Councillor McPherson, I don't have the data in front of me, but you're right to assume that connections doesn't necessarily just align to the domestic market. In fact, a lot of the large value ones are in your commercial and your industrial type connections, so it's right across the board. My advice would be probably what we're looking at is making sure that those budgets that we have in both our LTP and your planner are more reflective on the volume of work that's currently being undertaken in the market.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I guess I'm trying to get in my head whether there's this is giving us sort of information that would say our growth estimates have been undercooked somewhat. I'm not sure, you know, 3.7 million, what percentage of that is of the normal connections budget would that represent?
Yeah, I think it's probably more reflective of just budgeting rather than growth being sort of massively higher than what we anticipated. When I look back, I just don't think our budget estimate, even though it was neutral in terms of money in, money out, I just don't think our estimate was adequate.
Yeah, it's not so much the financial reporting that I'm worried about, because it is money in, money out. It's the flow-on effect, the impacts on the rest of our business, the opening up of new cells, for instance, and things like that, whether we facing a pressure that wasn't anticipated in the LTP. That's what I have a slight concern hearing.
I think there is an element to what you're saying, like it's, if I can use the word, it's just crazy out there at the moment in terms of the amount of connections we're doing. So it's really challenging for our teams to keep up with it. So it's a large volume of work at the moment.
Could we have, and this might be more relevant for the Strategic Growth Committee, perhaps some sort of information provided as to what that crazy out there is doing to our growth? I think that's a very technical description, by the way, what it's doing to our growth estimates, because this is the, you know, we're seeing the end result financially, but how's that going with our staff? Have we got a staffing resource? Have we got the right amount of income coming in from developers going into the future? I know we have right now.
Yep. Madam Chair, if I can pick that up for the Strategic Growth Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Dave, and if we can ask Chris to bring that back through your committee.
Thanks.
Kia ora. It's the finish of your questions?
Just a clarification, that was a good crazy, by the way.
Thank you. Next, I've got Mark Bunting and then online over to Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking of crazy, hello. I've got three reasonably simple down in the weeds questions, actually. I'm looking at, with a little bit of concern as Chair of Committee, about potential playground or play spaces delays. Are you...
Sorry, Mark, I didn't quite hear what you said.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at, there's an item in here under the risks, timing risks, and one of them is play spaces. Now, I'm not aware of any that we have had, or I haven't been had the heads up of any that potentially could be delayed. Are you aware of some that I'm not aware of, or are you just putting that there as a precautionary message because they take materials?
Look, unless Ian knows, I'll ask if somebody's online, Rebecca or somebody can answer that, or Lance Haycock.
I know it's a timing risk, and I kind of reconcile with the fact that they take a lot of specialist equipment, but I haven't been given the heads up of any specific ones.
Yep.
Do we have...
Right, looks like I've got silence on that one. Can we
make
come back?
up?
Can I give you an answer?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll be keen on that. Thank you. Just, I'd be taking that. Just following up on the contingencies questions earlier on, I'm aware of an item coming up in PX that, will put pressure on one of our contingencies. What happens when we don't spend a contingency? Where does that turn up? Because I don't recall a lot of underspends in a lot of projects. Where do we see that?
Yeah, look, sometimes they are declared through this committee and probably the savings line that we think. But a lot of the time they probably just get reconciled out at the end of an annual plan or a long-term plan sometimes as well. But we are trying more and more to capture those and report those.
Yeah, because I'd imagine it's the contingencies that come under stress with COVID first. That's the first thing that gives.
The contingency, hasn't really been put in to deal with some of those things, because when the budgets were put together, we didn't know what the world would look like now. But for a lot of the time, our two things are helping buffer through it. One is that we have contractual arrangements where we share the risk with the contractor, and the contractor is wearing some of that risk. And sometimes our contingencies is adequate to deal with that, and sometimes it's not.
Right. So is it common to be able to get a guaranteed maximum price for a contract, or is that pretty rare?
A guaranteed maximum price is a very, very specialist type of contract that we've never done here in my time in council. So you can do them, and there was discussion in the chamber the other day about one, I think, but they're very unique, and you would normally pay a lot of money for that risk, because that risk will be then passed on to the contractor.
Got it.
So our preferred model, which is a normal one, is a shared risk model, and it's value measure and value type contracting.
Right. Okay. Cool. And thank you. And last question, if I can, Chair Max.
Thank you.
This is the COVID costs, etc. Are you discovering any efficiencies that you hadn't predicted? Like, for example, using less power on the building because everyone's working at home. Less transport costs, etc., because people are more mobile. Based on pretty largely the discussion we had in the foyer about everyone working from home.
Yes, that might be more a question for our operational budget. I know that I haven't seen any contractors coughing up a saving.
No, more from our own costs, I guess, of running our operation.
Just to repeat what Chris said, it's probably more of an operational budget impact, Councillor Mark.
Yeah.
The point we made in the capital report, this was about capital delivery and the impact on our contracts to deliver the work.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mark. Were you suggesting that we're COVID positive? Were you suggesting that we're COVID positive? Kia ora, thank you. And if we go online now to Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Maxine. My question was a slightly bigger picture one, and it was just around the competing that we're potentially seeing between central and local government in terms of resources and capacity within the construction sector. I understand together we make up about 60% in terms of spend in the construction sector. So do we know if there is any work to kind of align what's happening between central and local government to reduce pressure, which is probably helping to push up prices as well.
Is that a question for you, Chris?
Yeah. So it's an issue that the construction sector accord deals with. So we're part of the construction sector accord, and that's a mixture of local government and central government. So one of the big initiatives in there is what they call pipeline. So it's visibility to our contracting industry of work coming up and trying to align works and programs to maximise the opportunities for efficient contracting. I think that's part of the answer to your question, and probably one that we pursue the most. And we have a process that we work with Waikato District Council and Waipa and try and do that, and try and signal to our construction industry what work's coming up and how they might tender for it. And through that, efficiency is part of that as well.
Okay. And thanks, Chris, did you say that central government has some role within that accord as well?
At the highest level, the Infrastructure Commission do a lot of work on the National Infrastructure Pipeline. So they've reached out over the last 2 years to local government. So we're part of that accord, and Chris Barton in particular did a lot of, which I need to replace, but he did a lot of work in that space and working with Wellington on how to portray our program here in Hamilton in a national pipeline.
Okay, right. So there is some regular communication between the two. Thank you.
Okay, that being all the questions, I think we'll ask Ian and Chris to leave the desk and open for debate. Is there... Oh, I beg your pardon, we need a mover. And Rob will move. I'm happy to second. And we'll move to debate. If there is any. And there is none. So by a show of hands. I beg your pardon. Sorry, Ewan.
Maxine.
Sorry, Councillor Ewan. The floor is yours.
Yeah, look, obviously I will support the receiving of the report. I do want to express, however, my ongoing frustration and disapproval of both our budgetary processes and the use of deferrals. And it's something that I'll continue to apply considerable pressure to get a review of. I'm also very keen to see a change in the way we manage deferrals in relation to inflationary pressures. I believe it's a tool that we're using, it's become institutionalised, and I think it is dangerous. It's particularly dangerous when we keep passing these projects on to subsequent years without reflecting truly the likely increase of costs. But I accept that today all I'm doing is receiving the report, so I will support it, but I am sending a message that I intend to challenge both the use of deferrals, the policies around deferrals, and in the very near future.
Thank you. Councillor Dave.
Speak in support of the motion, though I do, but I did raise my eyebrows at the terminology just used, and I quote, use of deferrals, which imply directed to staff, which implies that they're being used as a tool somehow, perhaps nefarious, to juggle finances to make them perhaps look better. I don't know. I think that's unfair on staff and management. If there's any issue with deferrals, and perhaps there is at sometimes, I think the responsibility lies with elected members for putting too much on the plate of staff, perhaps, but more importantly, in this occasion, I draw attention to the information Ian gave us during the report, where there was, in the last financial year, a significant increase in delivery of work programs compared with the year beforehand. And I think that's the important information that I gleaned from the report. No one particularly wants deferrals, but we've already agreed to look at each deferral as a standalone issue. What's caused that? You know, is there a way to remedy that, speed it up? Is it part way through? Is it the contract already let? Have there been other factors from outside? There's all sorts of reasons why deferrals might happen, and we do need to analyse them and keep a lid on them. But in my experience, there's far more attention paid by staff to deferrals now and in the last 6 years or so than there ever was before. And I think staff do an excellent job in reporting those to us in a timely fashion. And I don't think they've got out of hand, especially not when you consider the increase in delivery that staff have been able to achieve on our behalf and on the city's behalf. Thanks.
Thank you. I see no others for debate, so I'll put the motion. And you'll find that on page 15, just with a show of hands.
Please, just my hands today.
And
The motion is carried unanimously.
thank you. Councillor Martin, I see your hand is up. Is that your vote in support of the motion? Thank you.
No, yes, no. We have a system where wave hands around and suddenly the screen activates another hand, but never mind.
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? How smart. Technology, eh, Martin? Good on you.
Madam Chair, just a procedural question. I note that we still can't see the chamber. Is there an update as to the IT problem, whether it's been resolved?
Thank you. I'll defer to Amy.
Yes, we have many staff in the background trying to get it up and going, but they need to reset part of the system, and we can't do that whilst in the middle of a meeting.
Madam Chair, would it be appropriate to call a sort of a 5-minute break to enable us to do that? Because otherwise it's a little hard to participate in democracy when you can't actually see the chamber.
I understand your point. I had hoped that we would be able to get through this next item and take a break at 11. Is that an opportunity for staff to then take care of that issue?
We'll try at that point, yes.
Thank you.
If that does fail, then I just log into Zoom so I can watch it here and mute as well. That helps. If we all logged in, then we'd all be accounted for. And secondly, should we all zip out and do the vacuuming during the break?
Thank you. Does that suit all right?
That was Rob, Jeff. That was
Councillor
Rob.
Ewan?
Sure.
That we take a break at 11 and look to be able to resolve that. Okay. Thank you. All right. Can we move on now to item 8? And Tracy's in the chair and the meeting is yours.
Maxine. So good morning, everyone. So I'm here this morning to present to you the January 2022 results. So our accounting result year-to-date in January continues to report a favourable result. The year-to-date actuals was $87.5 million, which was $5.9 million favourable against our budget. So our balancing the books result is also favourable, and we are year-to-date $7.4 million ahead of budget. From a forecasting perspective, you'll note in paragraph 22, we're reporting a large year-to-date variance of $76.3 million in our accounting result. So this variance is due to the movement in our loss on a sale account. So we had budgeted to vest the Ring Road and Resolution Drive to Waka Kotahi this year. However, that's no longer going to happen. So we're just forecasting that out of this year's results, and obviously we'll include it as part of the annual plan that we are in the process of doing at the moment. And it also includes the unbudgeted gain on revaluation in our swaps, which year-to-date is currently sitting at $21 million. So again, just a reminder to elected members that both of these are non-cash transactions. However, they do get picked up as part of our accounting result. So while our year-to-date result is looking favourable, you will see, however, that we are now forecasting for our balancing the books result in June 2022 to be in deficit. So that deficit we currently is $9.2 million. However, over the next few months, we'll continue to look at what's happening in that space with obviously increasing costs come through, continued loss in revenue, as well as looking at our work programs and I guess determining what we'll be able to do by the time we get through to the end of the year. Again, just a reminder, a large portion of that forecasting is that depreciation from those buildings. In paragraphs 47 and 48, you'll see that we were non-compliant back in January with our counterparty credit risk measure. So basically, this is just a timing of bringing in additional funds and putting them out on investments. It just went over that end of that month, and we had and completed that in February, so we were back in compliance as in at the end of February. So with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm looking to the board and to our online councillors. And note that Councillor Rob.
Tracy, one question, just around the balancing the books forecast to 9.2 million, which I think we had at the previous meeting, we had, or you'd forecast that to be around 7. So
yes.
There's a fair bit of creep going on as far as identifying where that is going. In terms of where we've got to thus far with the annual plan, and I'm seeing as to how that might flow over into next year, does the 5% adjustment that, I don't want to take this out of the context that we might ask the same question on Thursday, and I apologise if that's the case, is the 5% going to be enough to pull back the 5% adjustment currently sitting in the modelling decisions, is that going to be enough to pull back this inflation drag that we're experiencing? Because some of that 9.3 must be around the inflationary pressures, say, since you've previously forecasted at 7.
Actually, Councillor Rob, it's not. It's actually the revenue. So the difference between the 7 million and the 9, 2 million of that is actually the revenue from our visitor destination sites and the likes of H3 and things like that. So as you know, over the last couple of months, we've closed, we've opened, we've moved, we've had less visitors coming through. And what that does is obviously decreases our revenue. However, the costs, because even if you've got it open for a little bit, you still have to pay all of your fixed costs and things like that. Okay. So that's where it becomes a mismatch, as opposed to when we originally did the budgeting. You'll remember it was kind of one or the other, not this hybrid that we're seeing right now. Okay. So a lot of the costs, to your point about inflation, remember that we've already locked and loaded most of our big contracts that we sort of have. So the only one that potentially could have an effect is probably electricity, which you heard Martin talk about, feels like a couple of weeks ago now, in that space. So yeah, while that's a big thing, we're offsetting that by things like, you know, some of those sites obviously being closed for certain periods of time and that sort of thing. So
are we seeing increased OPEX costs coming through as a result of the government increasing the minimum wage on the 1st of April? You know, in terms of, and I'm thinking of, you know, some of the contracts that we have around cleaning and security and so forth, where, you know, those organisations are already preempting with their retail customers what their price increases will be from the 1st of April to reflect that. And I'm using that one as an example, but I'm sure that in the inflationary context, there are other businesses who are, you know, such as oil and so price of petrol, who are wanting to pass those costs on sooner rather than later?
Yeah, great question, and it has been something that I have been monitoring over the last wee while. And like I say, the bigger contracts that we have already locked and loaded. So at the moment, we're certainly not getting any visibility of any changes in that space. A lot of our smaller ones, yes, probably, especially if we've got them rolling year by year rather than the 3+1+1. So at the moment, right now, no. But that's not to say, like you say, the closer we sort of get through April, May, June with some other changes that might not be different then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. I don't see any other questions. So do I have a mover? Rob, Councillor Rob to move, and I'm happy to second, or Mark Bunting second. Is there any debate? There being none, then we'll put it to the vote by a show of hands. And call.
The motion is carried
Madam,
unanimously.
Madam Chair, don't forget that Marai Jadine is here, and she did seek to move or second that. So
I beg your pardon.
No, that's all right. It's just I know how hard it is on Zoom with the multiple boxes, but just a reminder. Thanks.
Thank you.
So that motion was carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Because he says no one notices him when he puts his hand up to move stuff. So can you just keep an eye out for him in the future? He's growing, but he's sensitive.
Thank you, Mark. Sounds like an echo.
Yeah.
We've got a few minutes
We want
before.
to be expedient with time.
Madam Chair, I wonder if we break now to enable staff to fix the IT problem.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan, for that reminder. We haven't got the staff here at the moment to be able to do that, so I'd like to suggest that we now move to item number 9 and look to be able to work through that until we are able to confirm that we have technology coming in at 11. Is that correct? I do
Madam Chair,
understand the difficulty that you have in being able to participate in the meeting when you can't see the whole of it. But in these times, this is really what we have to be able to deal with at the moment. We've got a lot of business to be able to get through, not just today, but that may impact later in the week. So I'd like to, with your indulgence, to be able to box on to that 11 o'clock time frame when we know that we will have the IT staff in-house to be able to deal with our issue.
All right, Madam Chair, I have to accept your ruling. I have no choice, but I would like a minute note that I've now tried twice in the spirit of cooperation to ask for this to be addressed.
Thank you.
It was noted right at the beginning of the meeting that we had this IT problem, and it really does put those who are online at a disadvantage, and I think you're setting a poor precedent, but I have to accept your ruling.
Point noted. Thank you, Ewan. Okay, item 9, non-financial services performance report. And who have we got presenting that, Amy? Katie. Kia ora, Katie, and welcome to the finance meeting today. The floor is yours.
Good morning.
You're online, so councillors will be able to all see you. We can see you in the chamber as you all can online. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors, and I just do want to apologise. I've had my own technical issues at home and I've just had to jump in the car to get to some internet, so I'm sorry if anything is a little bit less polished than I would have preferred. I'm here presenting the mid-year non-financial service performance report as set out in the 21 to 31 long-term plan, and this covers the period of time from 1 July until December 31, 2021. I'll take the report as read, noting that as of the 31st of December 2021, staff has identified 38 measures that are on track to be achieved for the year end. We have got 6 measures that are at risk of not being achieved for the year end, and 8 measures that we are certain of will not be achieved by year end. There are another 10 measures that we have no data available as of yet, and those are usually our annual measures, and they will be available for the annual report timeframe. I'll take any questions at this time.
Councillors, do we have questions? Let me start. Katie, you talk about in the recommendation that the next 6 monthly update will be presented with the annual report. I wonder if you could tell us what timeframe that holds, just so that we have an idea of how we might be able to get visibility right across that 12-month review.
The official annual report wouldn't be able to be presented until it has gone through the audit process, and we're still getting a audit timeframe and a timeframe from when we will be audited. the year will end 30 June, so we will have some provisional results within sort of 3 to 4 weeks after that. We do need to allow time for them to have our own quality assurance and audit checks on them before we sort of release them further than that. So within sort of 3 to 4 weeks after the 30th of June, we could have some non-official results for the year.
Thank you. That's good to hear that. I understand that there is a delay at the Audit Office in being able to get through their workload. What do we know at this stage about the timing around their delay?
I'm not sure. I'd need to throw that to Tracy if she's on the call to answer that. I don't have any official timeframes around that yet.
Thank you, Chair Maxine. Actually, there's a whole report going to Strategic Risk and Assurance tomorrow on exactly that topic. So at the moment, we don't have a plan of what the audit will be due to the lack of staff in Audit New Zealand. From our perspective, we're just carrying on doing what we need to do anyway. We'll hear more from Clarence and the team tomorrow at Strategic Risk and Assurance. So happy for those that aren't part of that committee to, summarise that and bring that back, send that through by email if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, I think it'd be quite nice to be able to get some visibility over the final numbers at 30th of June at an appropriate time thereafter, even if that is in an informal way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we normally bring, I think it's the August committee, the August Finance Committee, we will bring the year-to-date results, if you like, back. And obviously what we're trying to do then is make them as close as possible to what then goes into the annual report and is the true year-to-date results. Usually the difference between the two is if audit comes back and wants us to reclass anything or make any changes or additional things. So every now and again there's a few tweaks, but most of the time it's pretty much the same. So.
And as I recall, there were some tweaks that were needed in the last survey, is that correct?
Yes.
With regard to service levels and responses.
That's right.
So it's not an unusual process?
No, not at all.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Katie. And I'll go to Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, Chair. Katie, thanks for your report. Just looking at paragraph 7 and the number of measures that need corrective action not achieved and data not available at this point, how are we tracking this year, say, compared with last year in terms of the numbers?
Numbers, it's relative. It's kind of hard to say at this stage because we've only had data from 31 December. This is also the first year of this long-term plan, so there's a number of new metrics we haven't measured before. Right. And COVID continues to throw up curveballs. So we did have a number in the 2020 year that we didn't achieve because of COVID impacting on participation numbers, etc., which is the same that we're seeing this year as well, that the majority of the off-track measures or the non-achieved measures are because of the ongoing COVID restrictions or changes in framework, etc. So it's kind of been an anomaly for the last couple of years around different impacts on results.
Right. So given that we have had the odd trip up in the past with Audit New Zealand in terms of some of our non-financial service areas, are there any in there that are in that sort of that sort of area of needing corrective action or won't be achieved, or we've got no data, which you believe might be important to Audit New Zealand, or is the answer exactly the one that Tracy gave? We're not as yet aware of what Audit New Zealand have picked or Cabinet have picked as being the important ones that they might focus on for this year-end audit.
So, a couple of parts to that answer. Audit New Zealand don't audit us on our actual results, so whether we achieve or not achieve is not something that audit look at. They look at the process we follow to get the result and to make sure that we have followed the correct process and that we're reporting the correct things. And as it stands at the moment, I'm not aware of any audit issues, data integrity issues, or quality assurance issues. And that's part of the processes that we've really become more robust this year to make sure that we're doing all of those checks each time we do the report and allow that extra time to make sure we're doing things correctly.
Thank you. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting, next, please.
Thank you, Chair Max. Yes, hi Katie. Hey, I'm really interested in this, and well done on, I guess, to all staff, and a lot of achievement in trying circumstances. And I understand there's a few reds due to COVID with attendance during our, with regards to our attractions and the like. But I'm interested, and I'm always interested in the staff perception studies, and our goals in those seem to be really low. And I'm just wondering how we pick those. So I noticed, for example, page 99, the percentage of residents who believe we make decisions that are in the best interest of the city, we're expecting at least 32% to agree, and we reached 43, and we're very proud of that. Who picks those numbers? Because they seem to be particularly low compared to our other numbers.
So what we do when we set the targets, we set it as part of a long-term plan process. So these were set in late 2020.
Okay.
They were set on the result we had most recently received from the official quality of life survey.
Right.
So if you remember, they have been historically quite low, and usually the 2018 quality of life was around the time of some consultation we did that wasn't entirely popular, so that helped pull down that result. We're slowly bringing it back up again, and that is what the target is based on.
Okay, because I remember asking this question before about when is the time to look at these questions and these answers, and just these ones sort of kind of stick out. Like page 85, we're expecting at least 60% of people to be proud of Hamilton, and we reached 50, which isn't flash. But I'm just sort of wondering, where would I as a councillor go to try and direct some work towards those perceptions?
Okay, I'm going to throw this one to Julie Paulson to answer.
Yep. Oh, hello.
Are you the passenger or the driver, Julie?
To your Uber driver, okay.
So as Kate said, Councillor Bunting, you signed off these targets as part of the long-term plan process last time, and that's where we set them. In terms of, I suppose the context of where these targets are set they are in a perception survey of the community. So you're surveying across a range of our community, and these surveys are undertaken by Nielsen for us. So we get a good representative sample, not only of the age profile, but also location across the city. And so you're never always going to get 100% positive response. You're going to get a very honest response, which is really useful for us because it helps us identify what we should change and focus on. Yeah. Having said that, we have noticed in the surveys, COVID has had an impact on people's perception of their quality of life and how proud they are of the city. Yep. Interestingly, with the proudness of the city one, they have actually think it's, a lot of it's to do with the look and appearance of the city. And so things like lawns not being mowed or hedges not mowed often seems to have had an impact. The other one is the council decision making. That's gone up again in our latest one, in our December one. So that's tracking back up towards where it was previously.
I see that. So we're almost just over half the people think we suck. That's great. No, sorry, I'm being facetious. But is that quite typical of councils, do you know? I mean, annual perception doesn't necessarily match our performance.
Yeah, that's right. And if you look at the quality of life 2-yearly survey that we participate with all the other metro councils, our ratings are very similar to the other councils. In a couple of places, we're one of the higher performing councils, which is really positive. We're about to undertaking that 2-year quality of life work again in the next month or so, and so it'll be interesting to see the result of that one as well.
Thank you. So could I suggest to you or your Uber driver that we make a note of how we stack up against other councils, because that's going to alarm anybody when they look at it for the first time. So thank you, I appreciate that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good suggestion, Councillor Bunting.
Cool.
I'm going to go online to Councillor Sarah and then to Councillor Dave. Sarah.
Thanks, Chair Maxine. So my first question was just around the missed collections, and obviously we've been under massive pressure with COVID in terms of our collections. I'm just wondering, the part of our response has been to reduce our services around, no longer, temporarily not picking up scrap bins and things. But we also have quite a few missed collections. Is that due to COVID basically, or is that something that is a larger issue?
I'll ask the GM or Tanya, Structural Operations.
Yeah, Eva Lisa's had to go, so apologies from here. So there's a couple of reasons for the missed collections. COVID is one, and the delays that we had where the collections were delayed by a day or two. So that's one of the reasons. The other one is a lot of the missed collections is in the green food waste bins, and they are quite small bins, and they often get hidden behind the larger bins. So those are predominantly the ones that get missed for the collection. So we are working with our contractor on better education and better improvement of the service in that area.
Okay, all right. No, that's helpful to know. It'd be good to get an update, kind of as I guess when we next have an update in IO committee or something on that. Thank you, Tanya. And the other question, which is probably to you as well, is around the survey where we asked, whether people feel proud of how Hamilton looks and feels. It was noted, a lack of maintenance, in terms of roadside plantings and rubbish and stuff. How much do you think that due to COVID, and how much do you think is due to just not quite having the right level of service?
Look, I'm just looking to see if there's any of my transport colleagues online, but I don't think there are. So,
Yes.
oh, there we go. There's Robin. Saved by Robin. Thank you.
Morning, councillors. So there is a combination there with regard to those issues. So we did have problems over a spring flush with COVID locking us down at the same time and not being able to get out. And then we've had issues with staffing since. When it comes to the state highway, we've been working with Whakakotahi to get approval to work on the state highway because there's new standards for the temporary traffic management that needs to be put in place. So we're working through that. We have been working with our Parks and Open Spaces team as well to look at the type of plants that have now been put in so that they, I guess, are more resistant and resilient to the types of weather that we're having and require less maintenance as well. So there's literally a press release being pulled together at the moment around that issue, and will be an update and exec update.
Thanks, Robin. So are you seeing what is warmer weather meaning more weeds, or is it just a funny kind of year we've had?
I guess it's a combination of lots of things. So obviously we have that spring flush, and being able to be out on the network at that time is really important, and so we missed that for this last season. And then when you get behind, it's really hard to catch up again. And so that certainly has been an issue, and I think most of us have experienced, even in our own gardens, the fact that every time it's sort of getting just about dry enough to make everything pack up a little bit, we've had enough rain to refresh everything. And just recently we had more than enough rain to water everything. So it's a combination of the types of species, being able to get out onto the network, and the weather.
Okay, thank you. Last part to my question was just, do you think that staff will be, as we head into the next long-term plan, recommending like a higher level of funding for this maintenance stuff, or do you think that we'll be able to kind of, without these other pressures, continue to provide a good level of service?
I think once things settle down, will be good. But what I would say is that we have a growing network that also has a growing landscaped network. So if we look at the likes of the Wairui Cobham intersection, for example, that's got a lot of planting in and around that. And we are getting, as we're getting into more stormwater treatment devices within the road reserve, so treating the water as it comes off the road before it then enters the system, we're going to see more landscaping type work that needs to be done. So I would say that there is an expectation that there will be additional funding needed. It won't necessarily be an increase in level of service. It's about reflecting the increase in the size of the network that we have to maintain.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Councillor Sarah. Councillor Dave.
Yeah, look, I'm wondering whether an analysis of the perception of council has improved or got worse since 2016 when Councillor Bunting was first elected to council. No, slightly more seriously, well, definitely more seriously, questions that Sarah has just asked about the roadside upkeep and that sort of thing that Robin was also responding to. Is there any analysis done by area or by sector of the city, geographical? I noticed some distinct differences myself around there. I don't know whether we ever analyse the public perception by area. I rather think that there are some areas that are well looked after, but that may be because of squeaky wheel syndrome. The public raises those issues more often. So I don't... Julie, maybe, since we've switched the seat to the driver's seat, I think.
We have. Yes, when we look at the quality of life surveys, we do go down to look across area as well and see if we can see if there's any marked differences. We're just doing some analysis on the latest one, so that's a really good question, and we'll incorporate that into our analysis and report back to you on that.
Thanks very much for that. The other question I had related to the transport service performance measures, and I note in there that you're saying during the period of actual lockdowns, the sort of responses have been excluded. But I'm sceptical of greens, solid greens all the way through. I'm sort of wondering, you know, there's been a lot of anecdotal evidence that transport around not just our city, but right around the world probably, but certainly right around New Zealand, has been easier in general, not just at the period of actual lockdowns, but a significant flow on. For instance, even now, school traffic seems easier to handle than it did in 2019, for instance. So I'm thinking there's almost the entire COVID period from March 2020 maybe should be discounted if we're looking at, is it easier to get around the city now than it used to be? It's implying that it is, but I'm asking you whether are you actually counting COVID effects for long enough?
Is there a particular measure, or is this more general around a couple of the transport measures to do with cycling and also
no, it actually started with the first page on 92, predictability of travel times, but I think it flows on to most of the other transport measures.
It might need to be something that we either come back to you with more information, or if someone from the transport team. A lot of these results that you're seeing are a point in time snapshot. Yeah. So it's just looking at the last 6 months, not necessarily a comparative on how that compares to previous years, until we get to a point, for example, the cycling one, where we're using this year to identify our baseline to then report an improvement on. Yeah. It might be something we can discuss further offline, unless Robin's got some input she can add and then come back to you with more information.
Perhaps just before Robin does, because she may like to comment on this as well, has a traffic count across the city, amalgamated one being done, because that might, if for instance, it might be easy to get around the city because there's just a much lower traffic count overall. I don't know the answer, but you see some anecdotal commentary about that sort of thing.
Yes, so Councillor Dave, we certainly have put some effort into trying to provide an accurate picture and to discount all of the worst impacts, I guess, of COVID. It is really hard to predict what normal is going to look like for a while. So I'm happy to share with elected members, I guess, some of the background work that we put into these results, because we did spend quite a lot of time just having a look and trying to make sure that we were giving an accurate representation for those times where we weren't affected by the level 3, 4 type lockdowns. But yeah, it is a really hard one. And as you said, basically, if you want to understand what normal looks like, we're really looking at 2019 data now.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dave.
Oh, sorry, I would be keen on just having a glance at some of that background data. I think you put it, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll work with the two Julies to provide that through to elected members.
Thank you. Perhaps that can come via an email rather than a formal meeting.
Yeah, an exec update or something like that we can provide. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. I don't see any further questions, and I understand that we've got IT waiting. So in the interests of getting you away to a tea break and having our IT resolved, I'd like to seek a mover, and I see Mark Donovan, Councillor Mark Donovan, and Mark Bunting. That's not an echo. Both to move and second. Is there any debate? Mark Bunting.
Just a wee tiny one. It is a little bit of a hobby horse of mine, these perceptual surveys. I just am pleased to hear that we will be adding a little bit more information to these in the future as to how we benchmark against other councils, because otherwise we're just going to sit there and go, oh, they hate us, oh, they like us. And I want to see the relevance and the trends that can occur as a result of these as well, because that's where they're useful. So if we could just extrapolate a little bit more of that out in the future, I'd be really delighted. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor McPherson.
Just following on one of my questions, I would like to see at times a bit of a geographical breakdown within the city, not just in terms of the results, but also in terms of the degree of engagement. For instance, I am possibly sceptical of how much engagement there might be from areas where there are high proportion of rentals as opposed to own your own home areas, because it may point to a need for other forms of engagement or enhanced forms of engagement to try and improve that in some areas. I may be entirely wrong. It might be better in those areas. I have my suspicions, but I would like to see us not have a one-size-fits-all approach necessary in a large city like Hamilton. I'm not that worried about how well we compare with Tauranga or Christchurch. That's often used for comparing rates, but in actual fact, our residents don't pay rates in Tauranga or Christchurch, they pay them in Hamilton. They don't use the roads in Tauranga or Christchurch, they use them in Hamilton. So I think that's the most important thing. I'm not trying to discount what Councillor Bunting has said, but I think let's see, bring all of our parts of the city along with us, not just some of the ones maybe that are noisier than others.
Good points. Thank you, councillors. And I'll be putting it to the vote by a show of hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to suggest that we take a 15-minute break at this stage. We're asking IT to work super fast to get our issues resolved, and hopefully that will be adequate. Can I suggest that we return here at 11:35?
Madam Chair, could I suggest that Councillor Wilson be asked to supervise the IT refresh?
Go and have a cuppa.